Hello, and welcome to the top 10 leading causes of death in the U.S. from 2018 to 2024. In this chart, I'm just looking at the actual counts, and this is preliminary count for 2024, which I pulled on July 26th of 2025, and I had to wait until the end of July to pull this. You may be wondering why. And this is because for external causes of death, such as accidents, and you can see them ticking along here as number 3 or number 4, as well as suicide, and then the other external cause of death, which is homicide, which does not rank in the top 10. They're censored for 6 months, and so I have to wait until the end of July so that I can get those causes of death in my ranking table. So let us take a look, and we can see for all of these years, heart disease is number 1, and then cancer is number 2. And the reason why, even during the COVID years, is that, of course, most deaths are of older people. And for this video, I'm just going to look at the overall population. I'm not going to break it out by age groups for this one. So we're just going to look at this across the board. And I'm not going to talk about percentage change from year to year, just the ranking. So we can see this is number 1, heart disease across the top, and then cancer comes in number 2. And it's not even really close with regards to cancer and heart disease in terms of the numbers for the absolute counts. So we'll just keep that in mind for right now. But so let's get down to number 3, where there were some changes depending on whether we were in the pandemic or not. For most normal years, accidents come in number 3. And this is where we start seeing some of the issues with regards to ranking causes of death, because I'm using the CDC's own rankable cause list. Accidents are a wide swath of external causes of death. It includes the kinds of things you would think of, like accidental drowning, motor vehicle accident deaths, accidental falls. But you can see these are all sorts of different things, but it also includes accidental drug overdoses. If I split these out, these are doing a lot of different things over the years, and what you would have to do to prevent these kinds of death or to influence these trends, very different things. So if I split these out, and often when I want to look at accidental causes of death, I do split it out by these subcategories. In any case, accidents in these normal years were number 3, and we can see that, and you can see the numbers had been going up, and then they did go down from 2023 to 2024, but still were number 3. But were supplanted in the initial and then the peak COVID year of 2021. In 2020 and 2021, of course, COVID came in. We see it number 3, COVID dropped to number 4 in 2022. And you see in 2023, COVID dropped to number 10. You're like, ooh, where's COVID in 2024? I did actually calculate it. It's not in this table because I'm only showing you the top 10 here. It's all the way down at number 15. So it's not that far down. It's going to be somewhere in the rankable list. It's still around, and it's still in the tens of thousands of deaths. But you can kind of see these causes of death start getting kind of close to each other in terms of numbers. So in 2023, liver disease, which was at number 9, that's 52,000 deaths. And then COVID is at about 50,000 deaths at number 10. So they weren't that far apart in their counts in 2023. Anyway, so that was number 3. And for COVID, we're going down here. So from here on out, I'm going to be following specific causes of death rather than the specific rank. And you will notice I did color specific causes of death because I have particular interests in what they're doing over time. I did not color chronic lower respiratory disease. It does get a little bit busy, but I'm going to follow it so that you can see what was happening with it. It was number 4 in 2018 and 2019, and that's at about 157,000 deaths in those years. It dropped down to number 6 in 2020, and it actually dropped in number 2 from about 157,000 down to 153,000. There may have been some displacement of deaths in that people who would have died of chronic lower respiratory disease, so that's stuff like emphysema, died of COVID instead. They obviously would have been very vulnerable to COVID being, respiratory in nature. And also the age at which a lot of people die from chronic lower respiratory disease tends to be older. Most of the deaths in these top ranking causes tend to be older, except for accidents. Suicide, that's kind of iffy. I'm not going to get too much into that. And liver disease. Some of these, it'll be future videos that I talk about that. But you'll see chronic lower respiratory disease, the number who died from that dropped pretty low in 2021. Again, I think some displacement of deaths, people dying from COVID instead of chronic lower respiratory disease. So dropped down to 142,000, started creeping back up in 2022. So it's still hanging around at number 6 here. It has climbed back up to number 5. Not back up to number 4, and I'll talk about that in a moment. It's still at a lower number than it was pre-pandemic. And again, some of this could be a pull forward effect. Some of the people who would have died of chronic lower respiratory disease may have died of COVID instead in earlier years. So they may have died a few years earlier of COVID. Instead of dying of the chronic lower respiratory disease, they may have died in 2023 and 2024. Okay, so now here is something that, let's take a look at the numbers. Stroke, we're starting out at 148,000 stroke deaths in 2018, and it's just increasing more or less every year. So up to 150,000, 160, 162, it's really 163 if we round up, 165 in 2022. It did dip down in 2023 and also moved up in rank to number 4 in rank, stayed at number 4 in rank, and at 167 in 2024. When we get to rates, because that's what we really like to look at as actuaries, this is pretty substantial. Next one is Alzheimer's, down at number 6, 122, 121. It went up in 2020, but went down in rank. So that gives you an idea of what's going on with death in 2020, but then dropped in number of deaths. So again, maybe a pull forward effect from the pandemic in 2020, more people dying in nursing homes, infections in 2020. That was very controversial, so I'm not touching that right now. Again, the numbers are down in 2022 compared to 2020, but it's about the same number as in 2018 and 2019. But then we get to 2023 and 2024, when we look at the absolute numbers for Alzheimer's deaths, it's still at rank number 6, but the absolute number of Alzheimer's deaths are a lot lower than they were in 2018 and 2019. Maybe not a lot lower, but noticeably lower. So another one of my highlighted causes of deaths, diabetes at number 7 pre-pandemic. You see it's at like 85,000, 88,000, but then increased by a lot during the pandemic years, over 100,000 deaths in 2020, 2021, and 2022, though the rank got pushed down because of COVID, displaced it, so it got pushed down a rank. Though the number of deaths went up by a lot. In 2023 and 2024, the number of deaths decreased compared to pandemic years. However, they're back to rank number 7. So, maybe a bit sideways here. We have to look at the rates to see how significant this is. Now, flu and pneumonia is an odd one. It's not on the ranking list for 2021 through 2024. We're probably going to see it come back for 2025, and it is, I believe, at actually rank number 11 for 2024. So I'm not going to talk about it too much. 2018, that was a bad flu year, so you see it at number 8. Flu and pneumonia does tend to percolate up and down depending on how bad the seasonal flu was that year. Not so bad in 2019. That was a quiet seasonal flu year, and it's flu pneumonia, so not just flu. This is a very seasonal, mostly in the winter, mostly December, January, February. You've got a spike of deaths, and again, mostly older people. And we see it go up a little bit in 2020. Some people, maybe it was COVID. I don't know. Okay, let's just not worry about that too much. But it did drop off. Actually, it was very low in 2021, 2022, and it's just lower than rank number 10. That's all I'm going to say about that right now. Just not going to focus on anything ranked above 10 currently, because there's plenty to look at in the top 10 causes of death, such as kidney disease. This is one of the worrying ones, and liver disease is the other one. So kidney disease during the pandemic. So we see it's about 52,000 deaths in the pre-pandemic years, and rank number 9, rank number 8. Flipping spaces with flu pneumonia depending on how bad flu pneumonia was. Okay, fine. Got pushed down to rank number 10 because COVID, displaced, yada yada. Okay, but 2022. 2023, 2024, we are seeing increasing number of kidney disease related deaths during the pandemic, and at the dialysis centers, which already have bad mortality experience. They were indicating they were seeing just some worrying trends among patients, higher incidence of kidney problems. Maybe this is damage from COVID, other things happening. This also relates to diabetes, metabolic problems, and we also see this with liver disease. It wasn't in the top 10 pre-pandemic, but we see it coming into the top 10 in 2021. Part of this is the flu pneumonia getting pushed down. So liver disease was right in the next tier, in the next, 11 to 15. It's popping in there. Now, I will admit, some of this is alcoholism related, okay? So some of this is alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver, and that tends to be long-term, but this really spiked up kind of immediately. And again, I'm not talking about the percentage changes. I will do that in future videos. Very concerning. These numbers are a lot higher than they were pre-pandemic. I will just tell you that. Suicide has its own thing that's going on. I'm not talking about what the numbers were. This actually has a long-term trend that has been very bad, both male and female, if you know about the differences there. So not a lot of happy stories that you can see in this table just looking at it by itself. Now I'm jumping over to it's the exact same ranking table, except the way I'm presenting the numbers to you is by age-adjusted death rates. Age-adjusted death rates are where we're normalizing the population in age buckets. We're taking the death rates for each of the age buckets and normalizing it. Now, to be sure, the population did not change much from 2018 to 2024 in terms of its age distribution, even with all of the COVID deaths. So the ranking really doesn't change, and I didn't change the ranking, by the way. And the only ones where I'm going to show you where the ranking should flip, if we did it on an age-adjusted death rate versus number of deaths, are down here with the suicide. Okay, so I'm just going to point that out, suicide has an age-adjusted death rate of 14.2, which is higher than kidney disease. And that's because there is a younger skew to the suicide deaths compared to kidney disease. Similarly here in 2019, that's 13.9. And this rate is per 100,000 people per year. So this 13.9 is higher than the flu, pneumonia, and the kidney disease. Again, because it has a lower average age of death. And again, if I go over to the right here, we see in 2024 when suicide perks up a little more, we have 14.0, and it would be above kidney disease and liver disease. One of the causes of death that you're not seeing on this ranking table, where it would be much higher if we did age-adjusted death rates, that would be homicide, because that skews a lot younger than suicide and, these other ones. I'm not going to talk about homicide today. Now, what do I want to point out? I don't really want to point out anything about COVID. It's doing its thing. I do want to point out we had the numbers before. So let's compare maybe before and after, or what are these numbers doing in terms of rate, before, during, after the pandemic. So let's look at our top two, heart disease and cancer. So heart disease starts out at about 164. Let's ignore all of these decimals. So 164. And then it went down in 2019 to about 162. Then it pops up to 168, pops up again 174, woo, in 2021, comes down 167, comes down 162. It's up a little bit, 2024, 163. So maybe something going on with heart disease, something we want to dive deeper into later. Okay, let's look at cancer. Here's something interesting, and I do need to say something about what's going on with some of these numbers. So it starts out at 149 in 2018, down to 146 in 2019. In 2020, it doesn't go up, it continues to go down, 144. It bumps up a little bit to 147. Okay, so it's not this huge spike as you see with heart disease, but this might not be totally real either. There is a numbers estimate thing. I'm using the CDC number. The Society of Actuaries actually came up with other estimates because it's not the number of deaths. The number of deaths are just fine. It's the denominator that go into these death rates that the CDC was using. It was a timing issue with the census and yada, yada. They misestimated basically how many old people there were. So the 2021 estimates were a little high on the death rate. So they kind of undercounted how many older people there were for 2021. So usually, and especially since that's a few years in the past, we just kind of ignore that. And that was a peak death year anyway, but it gives a misimpression that there was a cancer death rate spike in 2021, and there actually wasn't. It actually just kept going down. And so you see it goes down, 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 142, about 142 in 2023. But there is something going on in 2024, 144. And again, something I need to talk about later in a future video. There is something going on with cancer. And here's the issue. Cancer is not a single disease. There's multiple kinds of cancer. Some cancers are progressing very well. And one of the big issues is there's this big cancer, lung cancer, that is basically masking all of the other cancer trends out there. And that's been progressing downwards because that's driven by the history of smoking. And, that's kind of plateaued out at whatever level smoking is at currently. It's just where it is. There's other cancers that are trending in a concerning direction. Has nothing to do with COVID. It's a long-term trend. We'll talk about that another time. Let's look at accidents. So we have 48, 49, then 58, 65. Oh my gosh, 64. That's still very high, 62. Then it does come down about 55. That's still pretty high compared to the pre-pandemic. And again, what is in there? Drug overdoses, motor vehicle accident deaths. We need to break this out. What's going on in there? And drug overdoses did come down, motor vehicle accident deaths did come down, but how much did it come down, and where are the trouble spots? We really need to tease that out. Let's look at let's not look at chronic lower respiratory diseases. That's not that interesting. It did come down a lot, by the way. And again, is that because a lot of those people died due to COVID during the pandemic, so they're not around to die now? Stroke, 37 goes up a little, 39, 41, 40, 39, 40. So maybe we're at a higher level, something going on there. Let's look at diabetes, 21, 22, then goes up to 25, 25, 24, then 22, 22. So this might be a sideways trend, but again, this is a lot of information over multiple age groups collapsed into a single number per year. There may be multiple trends over multiple age groups that we need to investigate. Kidney disease, again, it's about 13, 13.6, 13.8, 13.1, 13.0. Is there something going on here? It's hard to tell with these single numbers. A lot of information collapsed into a single number. Are we back to normal? Or are there specific age groups that are having issues? Liver disease, we're not seeing this in context, so we're not seeing what happened prior to 2021. And similarly for suicide, we're not seeing the long-term trend here. So this is just a snapshot. You kind of see it in context. Something has to come in at number 10. Something has to come in at number 1. We're only seeing some of the trends. So you're just looking through a small keyhole of what's going on here with the causes of death. So I'll be doing some more in-depth for, different causes of death, different age groups, and we'll see how this longer term trend, shorter term trends have been influenced by the pandemic and also other trends going on in the US.